It was a typical Thursday evening when my world came crashing down. I had just come home from a long day at work, exhausted but looking forward to the comfort of my wife, Sarah, and our usual routine. As I stepped through the door, I noticed something was off. The air felt thick with tension, and there was an unusual silence that hung in the air. Sarah was usually bustling around the kitchen, preparing dinner or tidying up, but tonight the house was eerily still. I shrugged off the feeling, attributing it to my own fatigue. I tossed my keys onto the table and called out her name. No response. A knot formed in my stomach as I moved toward our bedroom, the only other place she could be. As I approached the door, I noticed her phone lying on the bedside table, screen lit up with a message notification. I hesitated, torn between respect for her privacy and an unsettling curiosity that clawed at me. Against my better judgment, I picked it up. The name that flashed on the screen made my heart drop. Jake. My mind raced. Jake was the owner of the gym Sarah frequented. Place I had always supported her going to, believing it was just about fitness. But as I read the message, I felt a chill run down my spine. It was a flirty exchange, filled with emojis and insinuations that twisted my insides. My breath quickened and the world around me began to blur. I felt like a fool. How had I not seen this coming? The signs were there, subtle but present. The late nights at the gym, the secretive glances at her phone, the way she seemed to light up whenever she talked about Jake. I had dismissed them all as paranoia, convinced that my marriage was solid. But here I was, staring at undeniable evidence of betrayal. My heart raced, each beat echoing the word liar in my head. I dropped the phone back onto the bed, feeling its weight like a stone in my gut. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake her awake from whatever delusion she was in. Instead, I stood frozen in place, suffocating under the weight of disbelief and anger. How could she do this to me? The questions spiraled in my mind, drowning out rational thought. We had built a life together, shared dreams and ambitions. I had loved her fiercely, supported her through every challenge, and this was how she repaid me. The betrayal felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but a part of me hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if there was an explanation that could somehow make this all okay? But the flickering screen of her phone taunted me, and the certainty of her infidelity settled like a heavy fog. I knew I needed to act to find out the truth, but I also knew that once I confronted her, there would be no turning back. The thought of exposing the truth was intoxicating, a dangerous spark igniting a desire for revenge within me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I would not be the man who stood by while my wife betrayed me. I would not be the fool. I would confront her, confront Jake, and I would make sure everyone knew the truth about what was happening behind closed doors. As I left the bedroom, my heart pounded with a mix of dread and determination. I was no longer the passive husband. I was a man scorned, ready to take action. The path ahead was dark and uncertain, but I felt a strange sense of clarity. I would expose the affair, and the world would know the truth. The hours that followed my discovery were a blur. I found myself packing the living room, my mind racing as I replayed every moment of my marriage with Sarah. Memories flashed before my eyes. Our first date at that little Italian restaurant, her laughter as we shared stories about our lives, the way she looked at me with those bright, trusting eyes. It all felt like a cruel joke now, a facade hiding the truth of her betrayal. I tried to piece together the signs I had ignored. I thought about the times she had come home late from the gym, her excuses always thin and rehearsed. Traffic, she would say, or I lost track of time. I remembered the way she had become more secretive with her phone, suddenly protective of her messages and calls. I had brushed it off, convincing myself it was just her newfound commitment to fitness. But now, it was painfully clear that I had been blind to the truth. As I walked around the house, I felt a mix of anger and confusion. How could she do this to me? Was I not enough? My mind spiraled into a pit of self-doubt. Had I failed her in some way? Was my love not sufficient? I thought about my own insecurities, my job, my appearance, my ambitions. I had always strived to be the best husband I could be, but clearly it hadn't been enough for her. The thought stung like a slap to the face. I grabbed a drink from the fridge, the coldness of the can grounding me momentarily. I needed clarity, a plan. I couldn't just sit here and wallow in my feelings. I had to confront her, confront Jake. I had to make them both understand the extent of their betrayal. But how? What would I say? The thought of facing Sarah filled me with dread, yet I knew it was inevitable. I could no longer pretend that everything was fine. In my mind, I began to construct the conversation. I imagined her surprise, her denial. Would she try to explain? Would she lie? The thought of hearing her excuses made my blood boil. I wanted to shake her, to make her feel the pain she had caused me. But I also knew that I had to stay calm, collected. I needed to be strategic. If I was going to confront Jake, I had to do it in a way that would make an impact. I envisioned walking into the gym, the place where she had betrayed me with a man I had never met. I could see myself standing there, revealing the truth to anyone who would listen. The idea was intoxicating, a rush of power that made my heart race. I wanted the members of that gym to know exactly who Jake was, a homewrecker, a liar. I wanted them to see him for what he truly was, to strip away the facade he wore as the charismatic business owner. But then a flicker of doubt crept in. What if this backfired? What if I became the villain in this story? My mind raced with the potential consequences. Would Sarah hate me forever? Would I be ostracized from the community? The thought of being judged by friends and acquaintances gnawed at me, but the desire for revenge overshadowed those fears. I grabbed my phone and stared at Sarah's messages with Jake. Each one felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my heart. She had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible, and now I was left with the shards of our shattered trust. I could feel the anger boiling within me, and I knew I had to channel it into something productive. I decided then and there that I would expose the affair. It was time for the truth to come out. I would confront her, confront Jake, and I would make sure that their betrayal was known. I could already envision the scene. The gym would be packed, people working out, laughing, unaware of the storm that was about to hit them. And then I would walk in, my heart pounding, and I would make my announcement. As I thought about my plan, a sense of calm washed over me. I was no longer the victim. I was the agent of my own narrative. I would take control of my story, and they would feel the weight of their actions. The idea of exposing their affair filled me with a strange satisfaction, a sense of justice that I had been longing for. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. This was just the beginning, and I was ready to face whatever fallout awaited me. I would not let this betrayal define me. Instead, I would rise from the ashes of my broken trust, stronger and more determined than ever. The next day, I woke up with a clear sense of purpose. The sun streamed through the window, illuminating the remnants of my shattered trust. I had spent the night tossing and turning, thinking about how to handle what I had discovered. But now the decision had crystallized in my mind. I would expose Sarah's affair with Jake, and I would do it at the gym, the very place where she had betrayed me. I had already mapped out my plan. The gym was bustling with activity, filled with people who trusted Sarah and admired Jake. They had no idea that behind the smiles and the friendly banter lay a web of deceit. I envisioned the scene, people lifting weights, running on treadmills, their faces flushed with effort, completely unaware of the storm that was about to break. I would walk in, and the truth would come crashing down like a tidal wave. But as I sat there, sipping my coffee, I couldn't shake the gravity of what I was about to do. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about exposing the truth. I felt a sense of righteousness, a moral obligation to make sure that both Sarah and Jake faced the consequences of their actions. They had betrayed not only me but also the trust of everyone around them. I needed to make them understand the pain they had caused. I thought about how I would confront Jake. Would he deny it? Would he try to play the victim? I imagined his smug smile fading as I laid bare the truth, revealing the messages I had read. I could see it now, the shock on his face as he realized that his world was about to crumble. My heart raced at the thought of it. The idea of standing there with the evidence in hand felt like a rush of power that I desperately craved. But what about Sarah? The thought of confronting her was equally daunting. I knew she would be furious, scared, and defensive. She might try to manipulate. the situation, to twist it around so that I would be the bad guy. I had to be prepared for that. I would not let her turn this back on me. I had to stay strong, resolute in my decision. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about exposing their affair. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I had spent too long feeling like a fool, and I wasn't going to let them continue to make a mockery of my life. I wanted the gym members to see Sarah for who she really was, someone who had betrayed her husband and shattered a marriage for a fling. As I finished my coffee, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I grabbed my phone and took a moment to compose a message to a few friends who frequented the gym. I wanted them to be there, to witness the truth unfold. I knew that if I could rally some support, it would make the confrontation even more impactful. I quickly typed out a message, inviting them to meet me at the gym later that evening. I took a deep breath and hit send, my heart racing. As I did, there was no turning back now. I felt a mix of excitement and dread. Would they support me? Would they understand the pain I was feeling? I hoped so, but I knew that I had to focus on my own resolve. As the day progressed, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. I went through the motions of my day, but my mind was always drifting back to the gym and the confrontation ahead. I imagined the looks of shock on the faces of my friends as I revealed the truth. I imagined Sarah's reaction, the disbelief, and then the anger. I could almost hear her voice trying to defend herself, to make excuses, but I would be ready for her. I would not let her manipulate the narrative. I arrived at the gym later that evening, my pulse quickening as I stepped through the doors. The familiar sounds of weights clanking and the rhythmic thumping of feet on treadmills filled the air. I could see Jake behind the front desk, chatting with a few members, his smile wide and inviting. It made my stomach turn. How could he act so normal when he was involved in such a betrayal? I scanned the room, spotting a few of my friends gathered by the weights section. They looked up, surprised to see me there. I approached them, my heart pounding, and explained the situation in hushed tones. I could see their expressions shift from curiosity to disbelief as I recounted the details of Sarah's affair. They were supportive, but I could see the concern in their eyes. They knew this was going to be messy. As I prepared for the confrontation, I felt a mixture of anger and clarity. I was not just a victim. I was a man ready to reclaim my narrative. I would expose the truth, and I would make sure that both Sarah and Jake faced the consequences of their actions. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. It was time to confront Jake, time to reveal the affair, and time to make sure that everyone knew the truth. The atmosphere inside the gym was charged with energy, but for me, it felt suffocating. As I walked toward the front desk, my heart hammered in my chest, each beat echoing the resolve I had built up over the past few days. I spotted Jake, his confident demeanor radiating from behind the counter, chatting with a couple of members. My fists clenched at my sides, a mix of anger and adrenaline surging through me. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, glancing back at my friends who had positioned themselves strategically in the weight area. They were my support system, ready to witness the truth unfold. I could see the concern on their faces, and it gave me a small measure of comfort. I was the one who had to step into the fire. "Jake," I called out, my voice steady but laced with tension. The gym owner turned at the sound of my voice, his smile faltering as he recognized me. I could see the confusion in his eyes, quickly turning to something resembling wariness. "Hey man, what's up?" he replied, though I could sense the underlying tension in his tone. He knew something was off, and I was about to tip the scales. I stepped closer, feeling the weight of the moment. "We need to talk." Now, I didn't give him a chance to respond. I pushed forward, my determination overriding any lingering doubts. I gestured for him to step away from the desk and out of earshot from the other members. Jake hesitated but eventually complied, a flicker of apprehension crossing his face. As we moved toward a quieter corner of the gym, my heart raced. I could feel the eyes of my friends on me, their silent support pushing me forward. "Listen," I began, my voice low but firm. "I know about you and Sarah." His expression shifted from confusion to a guarded look, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. "What are you talking about?" he said, feigning innocence. "Sarah's a great member, we've just been friendly." "Friendly?" I scoffed, barely able to contain my anger. I've seen the messages, Jake. The flirty texts, the late-night gym sessions. You think I'm going to let you play dumb? He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off, my voice rising. You think you can just take what's mine and act like it's no big deal? You've destroyed my marriage, and I want everyone to know the truth. The tension in the air thickened as I watched his demeanor shift. He straightened, his bravado returning. You don't have any proof, he said, his tone dismissive. You're just trying to stir up drama. I could feel the anger boiling inside me, but I forced myself to remain calm. You're wrong, I have everything I need. I pulled out my phone, holding it up for him to see. You think I wouldn't take screenshots? People deserve to know who you really are. For a moment he stood there, his expression a mix of irritation and disbelief. You're making a huge mistake, he warned, but I could see the anxiety creeping into his eyes. Am I? I shot back, my voice steady. You've made the mistake, Jake, and now it's time for everyone to see you for what you truly are. The weight of those words hung in the air between us, and I could sense the shift in power. I had taken control of the narrative, and I was ready to unleash the truth. Suddenly, I turned and raised my voice, calling out to the gym members. Hey, everyone. Can I have your attention for a moment? The clatter of weights and conversations faded as people turned their heads, curiosity dancing in their expressions. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I stood there, the eyes of the gym members fixed on me. I want to share something important about Jake, the owner of this gym. The murmurs began, a ripple of confusion and intrigue spreading through the crowd. My friends stepped forward, their expressions a mix of support and apprehension. Jake has been having an affair with my wife, Sarah. I have the proof right here. I held up my phone, the screen displaying the incriminating messages. This is what betrayal looks like, and I want all of you to know the truth about the man running this gym. Gasps erupted from the crowd, and I could see Jake's face pale. He opened his mouth to protest, but I continued, my voice rising above the chaos. He thinks he can get away with this, but I won't let him. You all deserve to know who you're supporting. The reactions were immediate. Some members looked shocked, others angry, and a few began to murmur amongst themselves. I felt a surge of satisfaction as I watched Jake's facade crumble, his confident demeanor replaced by desperation. Dude, you can't do this, he shouted, his voice cracking. This is a personal matter. I shook my head. Not anymore. You made it public when you decided to betray me. Now everyone knows. The crowd was buzzing with disbelief, and I caught glimpses of Sarah entering the gym, her expression shifting from confusion to horror as she realized what was happening. My heart raced at the sight of her, but I couldn't back down now. I turned my attention back to Jake. You've lost the trust of everyone here. You're not just a gym owner, you're a liar and a homewrecker. The atmosphere was electric, the tension palpable as Sarah approached. What is going on? She demanded, her voice shaking. Sarah, I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. Everyone deserves to know about your affair with Jake. Her eyes widened in disbelief, and I could see the panic rising within her. You don't understand. No, you don't understand, I interrupted. You made your choice, and now the consequences are here. The gym was filled with murmurs and gasps, and I could see the shock on Sarah's face. This was it. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. I felt a surge of power and release, but the weight of the moment was heavy. I had exposed their betrayal, but what would this mean for me? As the reality of the situation settled in, I knew that the aftermath would be just as complicated as the confrontation itself. The gym buzzed with a chaotic energy following my revelation. Members whispered among themselves, their shocked expressions flickering between disbelief and sympathy. I stood at the center of it all, my heart pounding as I processed what I had just done. I had exposed the affair, but the weight of the fallout was heavy on my shoulders. Jake's face was a mixture of anger and humiliation. He looked around, realizing that his carefully constructed reputation was crumbling in front of him. The bravado he had exuded moments before had evaporated, replaced by a desperate attempt to salvage his image. You'll regret this, he spat, but I could see the fear lurking beneath his anger. Sarah was still processing the shock of the situation. Her eyes darted between me and Jake, confusion and betrayal swirling in her expression. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice trembling. "We could have talked about it. Talked about what? Your affair." I shot back, my voice rising again. "You made your choice, Sarah. You chose him over our marriage." She opened her mouth to respond, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. I could see her grappling with the reality of what had just unfolded. A part of me felt a flicker of sympathy for her, but it was quickly overshadowed by the anger that had fueled my actions. Members of the gym began to approach me, some offering words of support. "I'm so sorry, man," one of my friends said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing." Others looked at me with pity, their eyes reflecting the horror of the situation. I felt like an exhibit under a microscope, my pain laid bare for everyone to see. As the murmurs continued, I caught sight of Sarah trying to speak to Jake, her voice urgent but low. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but the desperation in her tone was evident. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her to stop trying to salvage something that was already broken. But I held back, knowing that any further confrontation would only complicate matters. The reality of my actions began to settle in. I had exposed their affair in front of everyone, but what would this mean for my life moving forward? The gym was our shared space, a place where we had built connections and friendships. How would this affect my relationships with the other members? Would they see me as the victim or as the instigator of drama? As the initial shock wore off, I could see members beginning to distance themselves from Jake. Whispers turned into pointed looks, and I could sense the shift in the atmosphere. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction mingling with the guilt of what I had done. This was the justice I had sought, but at what cost? I turned my attention back to Sarah, who was now standing alone, her expression a mixture of anger and sorrow. She caught my eye, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of regret in her gaze, but it was quickly replaced by defiance. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice steady now, filled with a fierce determination that I hadn't seen before. "Regret what?" I shot back, my emotions surging. "Regretting exposing the truth. You made this choice, Sarah. You brought this on yourself." As the reality of the situation settled in, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. The adrenaline that had fueled my confrontation was fading, leaving me feeling hollow. I had fought for my dignity, but now I was left with the wreckage of my marriage and the uncertainty of my future. My friends gathered around me, offering comfort and support, but I could feel the weight of their pity. I didn't want their sympathy, I wanted my life back. I wanted to rewind time to pretend this had never happened, but there was no going back now. As the gym began to empty, I felt a sense of finality settle in. I had taken a stand, but the battle was far from over. I would have to face the fallout of my actions, the judgment of others, and the gaping hole in my heart where trust used to reside. Later that night, I sat alone at home, the silence deafening. The weight of the day pressed down on me, and I felt the tears I had been holding back finally spill over. I had fought for my dignity, but at what cost? I had exposed the truth, but I had also shattered the life I had built with Sarah. In that moment of vulnerability, I realized that I was not just fighting for revenge. I was fighting for closure. I had needed to reclaim my narrative, to confront the betrayal head-on. But now, as I sat in the darkness, I could see that the road ahead would be long and painful. I would have to navigate the complexities of my emotions, the judgment of others, and the reality of a marriage that was no longer intact. As I wiped my tears away, I made a silent vow to myself. I would not let this define me. I would rise from the ashes of this betrayal stronger and wiser. I would learn from the pain and move forward, even if the path was uncertain. The confrontation had been just the beginning. I had exposed the affair, but now I had to deal with the consequences, both for myself and for Sarah. I would find a way to heal, to rebuild, and to reclaim my life, no matter how daunting the journey ahead might be. The days that followed the confrontation were a whirlwind of emotions. I found myself grappling with an overwhelming mix of relief and sorrow. I had exposed the truth, but the fallout was far-reaching. The gym buzzed with whispers about what had happened, and I could feel the judgmental glances of some members as I walked through the doors. It was a strange feeling to be both a victim and a pariah in a space that had once felt like home. Sarah and I had minimal contact after that night, She had stormed out of the gym, and I hadn't heard from her since. Part of me felt a sense of liberation, knowing that I had taken a stand against her betrayal, but another part of me ached for the connection we once had. The memories of our life together haunted me in moments of solitude, reminding me of the love we had shared, now tainted by deceit. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what had happened. I thought about the signs I had ignored, the moments I had dismissed as insecurities. I realized that my self-worth had been closely tied to my marriage, and the betrayal had shattered that sense of identity. I had to learn to rebuild myself outside of the context of Sarah and our relationship. With every passing day, I found solace in routine. I returned to the gym, though it felt different now. I was met with mixed reactions. Some members offered support, while others avoided me, unsure of how to react. But I was determined to reclaim my space, to not let the affair define my experience. I focused on my workouts, channeling my anger and sadness into physical strength. Each lift, each mile on the treadmill became a step toward healing. I also started to reconnect with old friends, the ones who had supported me through the chaos. We met for drinks, shared stories, and laughed about things that had nothing to do with my heartbreak. It felt good to be reminded of the world outside of my pain. I began to realize that while I had lost Sarah, I still had a support system that cared about me. In the weeks that followed, I received a message from Sarah. It was a simple text asking if we could meet to talk. My heart raced at the thought. Part of me wanted to confront her again, to lay bare the hurt she had caused. But another part of me felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps we could find some closure, a way to understand what had happened and why. We met at a coffee shop, the atmosphere tense yet familiar. Sarah looked different, her eyes were puffy, and there was a heaviness about her that hadn't been there before. I could sense her vulnerability, and it reminded me of the woman I had fallen in love with. "I'm sorry for everything," she began, her voice shaky. "What I did was unforgivable." I nodded, my emotions swirling. "You hurt me, Sarah. You shattered my trust. I thought we had something real." "I thought so too," she replied, tears welling in her eyes. "But I got caught up in something I didn't understand. I didn't know how to be honest with myself or with you." Her words struck a chord, and for a moment I felt a flicker of empathy. "But you chose to be dishonest. You made that choice." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "And I regret it every day. I lost sight of what mattered. I don't want to lose you entirely." As we talked, I could see the pain in her eyes. It was a complex mix of regret and sadness, and I realized that she was hurting just as much as I was. We had both lost something precious. But as much as I wanted to forgive her, the wounds were still fresh. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," I admitted, my voice heavy with emotion. "It's going to take time, if that's even possible." "I understand," she replied, her voice steady. "I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know how truly sorry I am." After our conversation, I felt a sense of closure begin to settle in. While I still had a long way to go in terms of healing, I realized that I could no longer let the affair define my life. I had to focus on rebuilding myself, on finding happiness outside of what had happened. Moving forward, I decided to embrace new experiences. I signed up for a cooking class, something I had always wanted to try but had put off. I started hiking on weekends, exploring nature and finding peace in the solitude. I began to rediscover my passions, the things that made me feel alive. I knew there would still be challenges ahead. The scars of betrayal would take time to heal, and the memories of Sarah would linger. But I was determined to rise from the ashes of my heartbreak, to become a stronger version of myself. As I looked toward the future, I felt a sense of hope. I had faced the darkness, confronted the truth, and emerged on the other side. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had the strength to overcome it. The journey would be long, but it was mine to navigate, and I was no longer afraid. In the end, I realized that I had not just exposed the affair. I had also uncovered a deeper understanding of myself. I was more than just a victim. I was a survivor, and I was ready to reclaim my story. And so, with a newfound sense of purpose, I stepped forward into the light, ready to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead.